The clouds of Venus were a living thing, boiling, gold-white, and hungry. They folded over each other like the breath of a sleeping giant, lit from within by slow, bruised lightning. From that churning mantle, a needle of chrome and cherry-red enamel cut through with a hiss and a dare. The rocket's hull gleamed, rivets proud, nose cone polished to a mirror, pin-up script curling along the side, Starlight Serenade, fins swept back in elegant arcs. Vapor trailed off her seams like a silk scarf tugged by gravity's hand. Inside, the cockpit was a cathedral of gauges and brass toggles, a star-shaped yoke set with mother-of-pearl grips, and a pilot with lipstick, like a battle standard. "Cue the thunder," Captain Darla Starr said, and the planet obliged. Lightning spiderwebbed along the clouds, sketching her rocket in stark shadow as she rolled to clear the turbulence. She didn't so much fly as dance. The Serenade dipped and rotated through the viscous air, as if the whole sky were a ballroom and Darla had cut in on the storm. Starlight Serenade's nose art had never lied. Every angle of its pilot was a poster, every movement a promise. Darla was the kind of blonde the old magazines tried to paint and never quite caught. Victory roll curls tamed and untamed at once. A warm gold that held its own against the green-gold glare of Venus. Her mouth wore a glossy, unapologetic red. The winged flick of her liner turned every glance into a challenge. A cropped flight jacket cinched her narrow waist. The starburst at her lapel flashed whenever the instruments blinked. High-waisted flight trousers hugged long, capable legs and disappeared into polished calf-high boots with heels sharp enough to count as tools. Cat-eye goggles rested on her brow, lenses faintly tinted to echo the stormlight. Even the stray curl at her temple, disobedient as a comet, seemed to wink at danger as if it were an old flame. "Starlight Control," she said, voice smooth. "This is Star. Package convoy is on my scope, bearing 117 through soup. Beacon crate looks cozy in the center. 2 haulers, 1 tug, and a very nervous science pod. I count 5 Shepherd drones. How's my curve look from up there?" Static purred. Then a clipped woman answered. "Curve looks pretty, Star. Telemetry green. Keep the convoy tight. Turbulence spikes at 14,000 meters. If Venus slaps, you slap back." "I only slap on weekends," Darla said. "Copy the rest." Her co-pilot wasn't a person. He was a ball of chrome the size of a grapefruit, with an expressive seam around the middle and a single blue eye that blinked like a patient metronome. He hovered by her shoulder, humming when he thought she needed reminding and going quiet when she didn't. She called him Bop. Bop's eye brightened. Barometric pressure rising. Crosswinds variable. "Recommend roll 2 degrees starboard to avoid microvortices." 2 degrees, she said, rolling exactly 2.5. "Don't want the vortices thinking I'm predictable." Outside, the convoy burned like embers adrift in cream. The centerpiece was a rectangular cradle slung beneath an armored hauler, its sides embossed with the crest of the International Terra Science Authority, a seed sprouting from a globe. Inside that cradle was humanity's first Venus terraforming beacon, small enough to fit inside a delivery truck, dangerous enough to change a world. If it planted true in the upper clouds, it would chew the toxic soup into something breathable, something friendly. If it didn't, it would toss its guts into the wind and die with a cough of ozone. "Hello, sweet thing," Darla whispered toward the cradle, as if the device could hear. "We're going to tuck you into the meanest cradle that ever was. Then we're going to teach a planet to act civilized." Bop rotated. Anthropomorphic language continues to be suboptimal for mission clarity. Optimally, Darla said, smiling. "I'm trying not to think about how much paperwork I'll drown in if we ding the world changer." The Shepherd drones stitched a protective net in front of the convoy, spraying ions to push the thickest pockets of acid aside. Their pilot, a careful kid named Wyatt who chewed gum like it owed him money, piped in on the shared channel, "Captain Starr, turbulence ahead looks like a rumba with too many partners." "Then put your hand on her hip, Wyatt," Darla said. "Lead. We'll follow." Starlite Serenade's engines purred as she slid into point. Venus tried to wrestle her. She slipped, spun, and kissed the air back. Darla lived for this, finding grace inside the brute physics of storm. She lived for the moment when a machine and her heartbeat lined up. But today, there was more at stake than speed and clever hands. She could feel it in the silence between radio calls, in the way the convoy's pilots breathed. Earth had spent decades staring at Venus like a problem at the back of the book. Unsolvable, ugly. Now they'd built an answer. The beacon's core was a mad collage of catalytic lattices, radiation-tolerant microbial seed, and a quantum feedback array that could shape cloud chemistry at scale. It was messy, bold, and very human. Which is why, of course, somebody wanted to take it. "Bop," Darla said softly. "Any song on the airwaves we didn't request." "Scanning," the bot said. "Local ionization noise dominates. No coherent." "Correction." A note appeared on her board. Not a sound, but the shape of one, like the letters of a language written with math. A signature. "Too clean for the soup. Too smug." "Zorath," Darla said. The word was a pinch on the back of the neck. Most humans had never seen a Zorath. They preferred proxies and drones, their presence implied by geometry and Silent Harvest. An empire because everything they did arrived in multiples, lines of ships, arrays of weapons, loops of logic that strangled ecosystems and left behind latticed husks. To the Zorath Dominion, humanity was an unruly rumor, a backyard species that had gotten into the neighbor's shed and started tinkering. "Control," Darla said. "Voice steady. We have a squint from the big kids. I need 2-fox formation now. Wyatt, Shepherd's Titan. Tug, keep that crate dead center. We go quiet, and we go quick." "Copy, Star," the controller said. There was a tremor under the professional steel. "Confirming Zorath presence?" "Confirming intent," Darla said. "Presence is optional for their kind." The clouds went strangely thin ahead, like the sky had inhaled. From that breath came needles of black glass, so narrow the eyes slid off them. They didn't move so much as change their relationship with where they were. One heartbeat there was cloud. The next heartbeat something cut the cloud into triangles. "Hello, knives," Darla said. The first volley was silent. Where ordinary weapons would shriek and stamp, the Zorath used differential pressure and directional entropy. The effect on the lead Shepherd drone was obscene. It folded from the inside out, collapsing into a shape that had no business existing, then popped into steam. Wyatt swore softly and adjusted the pattern, holding. The second volley targeted the tug's thrusters. The tug slewed, cradle yawing. Darla's hand hit the yoke and the Serenade flashed forward, belly ramming the cradle back into centerline. Metal screeched. She felt the shove in every bone. The hauler pilot, a woman named Ree, exhaled into the mic like she'd been underwater. "Thanks for the dance, Star." "Keep your feet," Darla said. "Bop, give me the bow." Bop lit a schematic on the HUD. The Serenade's nose cone, streamlined, elegant, hiding a set of electro-auric emitters that weren't technically legal in 3 compact jurisdictions and were definitely going to be useful. Darla thumbed a switch. The nose cone seams opened like a blooming steel flower. The emitters woke. "Let's make a racket," she said. The Serenade sang. Not sound. Interference. The emitters pushed a wall of engineered noise into the cloud, a roar across the part of reality the Zorath used to place their cuts. Their next volley hiccuped, edges wobbling. One glass needle skittered off course and clipped the flank of its neighbor. The two disintegrated into scintillant dust. "Nice," Wyatt breathed. "Do that again." "Working on it," Darla said. "But I can only sing this note so long before my radiator starts smoking a cigarette and asking about my politics." They threaded the wall of knives, chafing the knife logic where they could, slipping where they couldn't. The convoy tightened, every ship committed to the shape of the others, the way dancers become a single line. For a handful of seconds, it looked like they'd make the insertion window, drop the beacon, punch for orbit, go home with stories. Then the Zoraths stopped being polite. Something vast slid out of the clouds on their port bow, a presence more than a ship. It was like seeing an equation grown large enough to cast a shadow. Surface without seams, angles that refused to meet at mortal degrees. A hex of uncolor that made Darla's eyes water to look at. "Flagship," Bob said, voice admirably calm. "Uh-huh," Darla said. "Control, we have a Dominion capital complexity on deck. I'm going to get their attention before they do something artistic." "Starr," Control started. She killed the channel. They'd thank her later, or yell at her in triplicate. Either way, there wouldn't be a later if she waited for permission. The Serenade kicked free of the formation, tilting her bright red fins like a wink. The flagship didn't move, didn't need to. A mouth opened on its surface, not a hatch so much as the absence of hull. Something within glowed. Not light. Possibility. "Come on, big fella," Darla murmured, and goosed the throttle. She raced across the flagship's front, nosing the emitters into a pure chord. The flagship's opening flickered. For a thrilling 2 seconds, its geometry rippled, trying to resolve interference it wasn't designed to admit. The mouth kinked into a knot. "Ha!" Darla shouted. Then the flagship changed tactics. A field bloomed around the Serenade, soft as sleep, total as a locked room. Her gauges went blank. The engine note dropped 2 octaves and flattened, still there, but like it had been wrapped in wool. The yoke suddenly weighed as much as regret. Darla's jaw clenched. "Bop?" "Field effect, decoupling us from standard vectors," Bop said. "They have redefined where here is." "Rude," Darla said, and toggled every physical switch that still had a wire behind it. The Serenade's mechanical subsystems fought like feral cats. The flagship squeezed. The rocket's nose drifted toward the open mouth. It felt less like being pulled and more like being included. "Wyatt," she said, back on the convoy channel. "Get the beacon clear. I'm going to take this one's breath away if I can. If I can't, I'll make sure they're chewing when they swallow." "Captain." "That's an order," she said. "Don't make me come back there, handsome." The mouth swallowed her. Color dropped out. Sensation went sideways. The Serenade fell, but not in a direction aircraft and bodies were accustomed to tallying. The cockpit lights dimmed, came back. Darla saw reflections that weren't hers wink in the canopy glass. Women with her jawline and smile, men with her laugh, all flickers of choices in a hallway of doors. Then the fall stopped. Gravity found her again. The Serenade settled with a hollow clang on a surface that hated being touched. Lights came up, not bulbs, but glowing lines that traced hexagons on hexagons to infinity. The docking bay was a cathedral, built by someone who thought worship and precision were synonyms. There was no crew, not visibly. Machines on rails unfolded and approached with the stilted grace of weaponized insects. "Bop," she said. "Engine status?" "Encased in variable topology. Locked." I can whisper to the reactor. I cannot make it roar. You always were a poet, she said, unstrapping. She stood. Her boots met the deck with a polite resonance, as if the flagship measured her weight and found it gauche. She shrugged out of the flight jacket, kept it on one shoulder for the silhouette, and checked the mirror on her dash. Lipstick still perfect. Good. She pressed a little more red from the tube anyway, then clicked it closed and slipped it into the small kit she wore on her hip, with a few other contraband charms. A compact, a hairpin, a coil of wire, a stiletto heel that could detach if a lady needed leverage. The canopy unsealed, not with a hiss but with a decision. Air like cool glass flowed in. Darla climbed onto the Serenade's spine and then stepped down to the deck. "Hello, boys," she said to the insect machines. "Let's keep this civil. I bruise, but I bill." The machines didn't answer. Instead, the air in front of her folded into a shape. An avatar, she supposed. It resembled a person only the way an hourglass resembles a woman. A set of ratios, tall, jointed, perfect in a way that isn't kind. "You are Darla Starr," it said. The voice had the timbre of an instrument tuned to a note humans never chose. "You are statistically unrepresentative." "I get that a lot," she said. "You must be the host. Do I call you your numerical highness, or do you have a nickname?" "Designation. Chorus of fixed edges," it said. "I will simplify to chorus for your impaired lexicon." "Chorus, then," Darla said, shifting her weight like a dancer rolling into the next step. "You've made quite an entrance." "You are in a place we wish to be empty," Chorus said. "This is a correction." "Kidnapping is a strong way to say hello," she said, "but I've had worse first dates." Chorus tilted its head. "Your speech contains superfluous symbols." "That's what they tell me," she said. "Listen, I've got a convoy out there with something important. You don't want it. We do. You're very advanced. We're very annoying. Let's both stay in character and go our separate ways." "You refer to the atmospheric catalyst," Chorus said, "an attempt to render a hostile environment less hostile. This conflicts with Dominion axioms." "Your axioms have a branding problem," she said cheerfully. "Most of the universe calls that being a bad neighbor." "Human structures are fragile," Chorus said, as if commenting on the weather. "Human time horizons are narrow. Human emotional recursion produces unpredictability. You are inefficient agents of entropy. You will not seed it here." Darla smiled slowly. The smile that got her scolded in flight school and into rooms where decisions were made. "You think we're inefficient? Honey, if you think we plan our best moves, you don't know us at all." Chorus made a small adjustment to its posture, a fraction of a degree. If it had been human, she'd have called the look puzzled. "Explain." "That's the thing," she said. "We don't. That's our secret. We improvise. We break our own rules when the dance gets good." The insect machines closed in, jointed limbs reaching. She lifted her hands as if surrendering, then twisted her wrist and palmed the compact. To them it looked like a mirror. To her it was a narrowly illegal auric pulse emitter sized for a lady's evening bag. She didn't fire it. Not yet. Planning wasn't the point. "Your vessel is contained," Chorus said. "Your body is malleable. We will adjust you to more stable parameters." "Try, and you'll learn a new word," Darla said. "It's short, it's sharp, and it sounds a lot like no." Something behind Chorus rippled. A new line of lines formed in the air. It watched her calmly, measuring. She felt it like a math test. "Why resist?" Chorus asked, truly curious now. "You do not possess the advantage." "Advantage?" Darla tipped her head, curls brushing her cheek. "Sweetheart, we built a life on not having the advantage. We got good at it. We like ourselves like this." Chorus regarded her for a beat longer. "We observed your transmissions as you penetrated atmosphere. You use melody to interfere. "We use whatever's handy," she said. "Melody, duct tape, bad ideas, lucky pennies. I'll throw a shoe if it helps." "Unbounded action," Chorus said, an engineer's version of a sigh. "You will proceed to the assessment chamber." The machines gestured, exquisite politeness in their terrible hands. Darla looked past them, out to where the Serenade rested like a gull on a black beach. For a fraction of a second, fear scratched her ribs. Not for herself. For the convoy, still out in that monstrous sky with a dream in a box. She set her jaw, stepped forward, and let herself be guided. Bop floated quietly at her shoulder. Eye dimmed to a thoughtful blue. The corridor they let her down was a lesson in control. Angles braided into angles until even the emptiness had seams. Doors were implied, not cut. There were no signs. The ship remembered and expected you to do the same. They brought her into a chamber with a floor like a drumhead, and walls that flickered with diagrams of invisible forces. The center held a frame big enough to hold a bear or a very patient person. Darla stepped into it without being asked. Better to pretend you wanted the ride. The frame closed around her like a spine without a body. "Assessment will quantify your pattern," Chorus said, appearing on the wall like a thought. "Predictive capacity increases with mapped recursion." "Mapping me won't help you," Darla said, and even she could hear the smile flattening into a knife. "Funny thing about humans," she leaned forward, eyes bright. "We don't follow the rules, even we set ourselves." The frame hummed. Her kit vibrated. Bop's eye brightened into a steady, careful flame. Darla rolled her shoulders, as if into a familiar coat, and let the machine try to turn her into numbers. "By the way," she added, "conversational while the first probe pricked her skin with cold. While you're busy predicting me, you might want to look outside. Did you really think I charged your front porch without calling a few friends to knock on the back?" Chorus did not answer, but for the first time the lights in the chamber hesitated. Darla smiled again, all teeth and lipstick and intention. The game was on. The Zorath did not walk Darla Starr into their flagship. They curated her. The chrome corridors unfurled like ribbons of ice, edges sharpened to impossible precision. Every panel glowed with a cold inner geometry, as if the ship itself was a living theorem that had decided matter was a suitable medium for expression. Even the air smelled clinical, ozone and something like scorched stone. Darla whistled a few notes of "Fly Me to the Moon," low and tuneful, her boots clicking defiantly on the deck. The escorting insectoid drones made no comment, their spindly limbs ticking on the floor like metronomes. "Nice place you got here," Darla said, though it could use a few curtains. Maybe a rug, something in red to tie the whole galaxy subjugator look together. The drones didn't blink, didn't twitch. But the walls listened. Hexagonal patterns brightened faintly, as though recording every inflection of her voice. They brought her to a hall so vast it could have held an ocean liner, though not a single piece of furniture softened the void. Only a frame, sleek, jointed, weighted in the center like a spider's invitation. "Human Darla Starr," Chorus's voice said from everywhere at once. "Enter the recursion lattice." "Recursion lattice? Darling, I already live in recursion. Just ask any of my exes." Still, she stepped forward. Better to be the dancer than the dragged. The frame closed around her with a hush, arcs of cold light tracing her outline. Probe slid into place, not touching but pulsing just close enough to make her skin prickle. Symbols cascaded across the chamber walls. Assessment. Mapping cognitive architecture. Psychometric tolerance trials begin. The first wave hit her like staring into a carnival mirror. Memories fractured. Flight school drills. Late nights over jazz records. Her first kiss under a rocket gantry. Folded into each other. Rearranged into kaleidoscopes. But instead of splintering, Darla laughed. You think this is gonna break me? Honey, you should see what happens when three-star sisters argue over Sunday dinner. The lattice pulsed harder. Images shifted, aliens she'd never seen, human soldiers broken by silence. Voices whispered, "You are fragile. You are finite. You're inefficient." Darla tilted her head, humming a syncopated tune under her breath. Old Earth jazz. Improvised, never the same twice. The probes stuttered, their readings faltered. Signal interference, Chorus noted, almost irritated. Clarify output. Oh, this? She tapped her throat and kept humming, slipping notes off key just to watch the walls wobble. We call it jazz. You can't chart it. You can only feel it. Her lipstick case slid warm in her palm, palmed smooth and quick. When one probe drifted too close, she flicked the cap open and pressed the beveled edge against the nearest panel. With a hiss and a crack, the treated pigment etched a neat line through the glassy surface. "Glass cutter," she whispered with a grin. "Never underestimate Revlon Red." One stiletto heel clicked loose as she shifted her weight. With a practiced twist, she drove the metal tip into a vent grill at her side, popping it just enough to make the ship's airflow whistle like a panicked flute. "Containment breach in sensory channel," a drone reported flatly. "No breach," Chorus countered, but its voice was thinner, hesitant. As the trials intensified, Darla began to see patterns in their hesitation. The probes weren't designed to interpret chaos. Every time she hummed off beat, every time she cracked a joke, every time she broke rhythm, the walls shivered. And then it clicked. "They're scared of it," she whispered to Bop, who hovered close with his eye a steady, knowing blue. "Clarify hypothesis," Bop said quietly. "Unpredictability," Darla breathed. "They can model force, they can model probability, but emotions? Instinct? Improvisation? That's noise they can't tame." She looked straight into the shifting lines of Chorus's avatar, her smile widening. "You wanted to see what makes humans special? It's this. We don't stay in the boxes we draw for ourselves." The probes faltered again. "Assessment inconclusive," Chorus finally admitted. "Subject resists stable recursion." "Get used to it," Darla said, tossing her hair back. "Because if there's one thing humanity's good at, it's coloring outside the lines." In that moment, Darla realized Earth's edge in the cosmos wasn't engines or weapons. It was irrational creativity, the refusal to be predictable, the refusal to be explained away. She hummed louder, tapping her boot in rhythm, while the walls of the mighty Zorath flagship trembled to a tune no machine could score. The lattice was a coffin made by mathematicians. Lines of hard light traced around Darla's body, mapping her contours with the precision of a draftsman's pen. She could feel the ship's attention closing in on her, like 1,000 cold eyes, each one measuring, calculating, reducing. Memories spilled across the chamber walls in fractured reels. There she was, 10 years old, climbing onto the back of a motorcycle she wasn't supposed to touch. There she was, 15, sneaking into a hangar to see the prototype rockets lined up like sleeping gods. There she was again, 19, kissing a man she didn't love just to feel alive, then laughing at the wrong moment and shattering the mood. Each image flickered, twisted, and broke into mathematical diagrams. "You are inconsistent," Chorus said, its voice rippling like water dragged across glass. "Data contradicts itself." "Welcome to the human condition," Darla said. "We thrive on mixed reviews." The probes pressed closer. They weren't physical needles, but she swore she could feel their touch. Cold static brushing her skin, slivers of sensation that didn't belong to her. A whisper tried to worm its way into her skull. Fragile, finite, predictable. Darla tilted her head and began humming, soft at first. The notes wavered deliberately off key. It was a tune she half remembered from a bar in Houston, the kind of song you only ever heard on warped vinyl. A trumpet slid one way, a sax another, and the drummer never seemed to agree with either. Jazz. Chaotic. Irreverent. Alive. The probes faltered. Numbers jittered on the walls. "Unstable input," Chorus said sharply. "Clarify output." "Sorry, sweetheart," Darla murmured, lips curling. "Some things you can't clarify. You just swing with them." She reached for her lipstick tube. The guards hadn't bothered to search her. Why would they? What possible threat could cosmetics pose to a civilization that bent matter into equations? She thumbed the case open and pressed the edge against the glassy wall. With a satisfying hiss, a thin scar etched across the surface. Not enough to break it, but enough to make the perfect geometry flinch. One of the drones shifted uneasily, joints creaking like an insect rubbing its legs together. Darla smirked and slid the tube back into her kit. "Revlon red," she said under her breath, "cuts through anything." Her right heel clicked as she shifted. She bent as though stretching, twisted the stiletto tip free, and palmed it like a knife. With a flick of her wrist, she jammed the heel into a nearby vent. The panel popped, releasing a sharp, whistling whine as the airflow shifted. Immediately, alarms flared along the chamber walls. Hexagons brightened, trying to patch the error. The noise deepened into a shriek, not loud, but maddeningly discordant. "Containment breach," one drone announced, its voice as flat as ever. "No breach," Chorus insisted. But Darla heard it, the faint hesitation, the static crackle in the back of the avatar's voice. She leaned her head back and laughed, not forced, not panicked. Just a warm, careless laugh, the kind that never belonged in a prison. The probes reacted as though struck. Their beams quivered, their readings scattering into noise. "That's it, isn't it?" she said, eyes narrowing. "You don't understand it. The cracks, the mess, the parts of us you can't measure." Chorus's form flickered. "Clarify hypothesis." "You're afraid of unpredictability," Darla said. "You want everything to fit your neat little boxes. But emotions, instinct, improvisation, that's noise to you. And noise is the one thing you can't stand." The silence that followed was almost delicious. "We are not afraid," Chorus said finally, but it was a child caught in a lie. "We are disturbed by inefficiency." "You keep telling yourself that," Darla said, humming again, louder this time. Her voice filled the chamber, a defiant jazz riff against the sterile hum of alien logic. She snapped her fingers in rhythm, the sound sharp and human and utterly unquantifiable. The walls glitched. For a heartbeat, she saw her own reflection looking back, smirking, alive, wrong in every way the Zorath couldn't catalog. The probes withdrew half a step. The lattice buzzed, its perfect geometry hiccuping as if struggling to hold her in place. Bop drifted closer, his eye glowing bright with quiet pride. "Observation, interference, successful." "Observation," Darla whispered back. "We just found their soft spot." The walls of the chamber swam with unfinished equations, numbers chasing themselves into loops, unsolved, unsolvable. Chorus's avatar stood frozen, lines of its form pulsing unevenly. "Assessment inconclusive," it said at last. "Subject resists stable recursion." Darla tilted her head, eyes gleaming like a fighter's before the swing. "Get used to it. We've been breaking our own rules since we learned how to walk upright. And we like it that way." She leaned into the lattice as though it were nothing more than a doorway. "Now, Chorus, let me tell you something important. You think humanity's weakness is chaos. But it's our edge. We don't plan our best moves. We stumble into them, trip over our own feet, and somehow end up winning the dance. That's who we are. And it's why you'll never see us coming." The probes pulsed erratically. The drones clicked nervously. their limbs twitching as though caught between orders. Chorus's voice came low, fractured. Unbounded action is dangerous. Exactly, Darla said, lips curling into that dangerous smile again. And that's why you should be afraid. She began to whistle a tune her father used to hum when working on engines, sweet and simple, but deliberately uneven. Each note slid into the next at the wrong time. To her it was music. To the Zorath it was a paradox. The lattice shivered, the walls dimmed. And for the first time since she had been swallowed by the flagship, Darla Starr felt the smallest shift in momentum, not toward defeat, but toward opportunity. The ship tried to make Darla a number, and when it failed, it decided to make her a problem. That suited her just fine. Problems had edges you could pry at. They escorted her from the lattice, drones ticking along with insect neatness, back through corridors that reflected her face 100 times over in cold chrome. Chorus spoke in her ear like an etiquette tutor who'd swallowed a calculator. Deviation from assigned path will result in correction. Correction's such a fussy word, Darla said brightly. Where I'm from, we call it learning the hard way. They put her in a holding gallery with windows that weren't windows, just projections of the ship's insides pretending to be glass. The room had angles that made you doubt your own eyes. A pedestal unfolded from the floor, offering a cube that rotated through colors she didn't have names for. A test, a toy, a trap. She smiled at it like it was a cocktail she didn't intend to drink. 2 drones lingered at the door. Each had a narrow band of light scrolling glyphs where a face might have been. They did not look at each other. Darla wondered if they ever had to. In a hive that ran on certainty, attention was a shared resource. Why waste it on a colleague who would always act exactly as expected? She leaned against the pedestal, casual as sunshine. "You ever get bored?" she asked the nearer drone. Same halls, same orders, same choreography. It didn't respond. The band of light on its front flickered once, then returned to baseline. See, Darla went on, conversational, we do unions. On Earth, when a job gets dull or mean, we talk, we gripe. We plan little uprisings that mostly end in donuts at a longer lunch. The drone's limbs clicked minutely, the ship's equivalent of a tensed jaw. Not that you could, she added sympathetically. You're all so perfectly aligned. Must be nice never to disagree. Nobody ever starts a rumor here, right? Nobody ever worries they're not enough. That got it. The glyph band hiccuped. It flashed a string of symbols she couldn't read, but absolutely recognized. The pulse of a query, and the echo of what did she mean. She lowered her voice, giving the words a lovely little secret weight. Of course, you've heard it. I can tell. The chorus isn't as precise as it used to be. The field harmonic stuttered when I sang. If I can shake the walls with a tune, imagine what a better singer could do. Which of you gets unmade when your betters decide you were part of the wrong resonance? The drone's angular shoulders lifted a fraction, off script. The other drone's band brightened in what she chose to interpret as a warning. Good. Tension. Friction. Heat. Don't worry, she soothed. Eyes warm enough to make chrome remember it was once ore. All systems fail eventually. What matters is who survives to write the post-mortem. Does the chorus protect its hands, or does it blame the tools? A third figure resolved in the doorway, taller and jointed with ornamental ribs like a cathedral skeleton. Not a drone, an overseer. Its presence smoothed both guards back into perfect posture. Human, it said. Silence. Make me, Darla said sweetly, and then ruined the moment by yawning. The overseer turned a fraction, its attention triangulating between her and the guards. That was the wedge. Attention. In a hive, attention wasn't just focus, it was priority allocation. Redirect it, and you changed reality. Query, Darla said, as if participating in a polite symposium. Do you ever cross-check each other's vector sets? No redundancy is required, the overseer said. All vectors converge. How tidy. She tapped the cube on the pedestal, watching it slither from violet to a green that remembered the ocean. Because where I'm from, convergence means either you found truth or you stopped asking the rude questions. Remove stimulus, the overseer told the guards. One reached for the cube. Darla let the corner of her mouth tip up. Careful, she murmured. That one's marked. The guard paused. The other guard's band flared. Marked? The overseer shifted again, a smudge of uncertainty smearing its line-perfect poise. By whom, it said, and there was hunger in it. The kind bureaucrats put in their voice when they smelled a memo someone else had seen first. Darla lowered her lashes. If you can't read the mark, you don't have the clearance. The overseer stepped closer. Just enough. She could smell the air bleed from its vents, the faint, scorched mineral scent. Clarify. You'll want to compare glyph phase on your bands, she said lightly to the guards, as if offering a housekeeping tip. If yours don't match, somebody's running a discordant patch. Both bands brightened reflexively. The overseer's attention split, first toward the left guard, then the right, then to a point between them as if triangulation could restore dignity. The guards, nearly, but crucially, not quite, simultaneously pivoted their glyph bands inward to compare. Bop, Darla whispered. The little chrome sphere had stayed politely dim in the corner ceiling, a speck no one cared about. His eye flared bright for a heartbeat. Just enough. The lights in the corridor dipped, barely. It was nothing, a flicker a human eye wouldn't blame on a bulb. But on the Zorath flagship, every microvariance meant priority reassignment. For 2 ticks of chorus time, those guards belonged to the power grid's stabilization queue, not the prisoner. In those ticks, Darla moved. The stiletto tip still nestled in the vent at her calf. She slid it out as she pivoted, took 2 liquid steps, and tapped the overseer's nearest knee joint with the precise, insolent pressure of a ballerina correcting a novice's form. The joint decided to lock to protect itself. She used the locked knee like a step, rose, and kissed the overseer's glyph band with her lipstick. The treated pigment flashed, sending a jitter of false status through a system convinced of its own infallibility. Status conflict, one guard blurted. Resolve, snapped the other. Do you resolve him, or do you resolve you? Darla asked, scandalized. What a choice. If you're wrong, the chorus will unmake you for insubordination. If you're right, it will unmake you for noticing. The overseer's posture went knife-still. Somebody, somewhere in the ship, routed a handful more cycles to this corridor to cool the brewing paradox. Those cycles had to come from somewhere. A door 50 meters away obligingly failed to receive the memo that it should be locked. Now, Darla said. Bop popped the vent grate fully with a burp of air. The whistling squeal rose a half tone. The corridor's acoustic sensors recalibrated, again, siphoning attention from lock regulation to the shriek's cancellation. Darla slipped through the newly forgotten door like a rumor acquiring legs. She was inside the navigational interstice before the overseer decided on anger. It felt like the inside of a compass designed by a dream. Rings within, rings turned without friction, each etched with patterns that were part star map, part prayer. Where a human vessel would have a helm, the Zorath had a dais where Chorus leaned its mind. No controls, no levers. Intention as interface. Ugly, she told it cheerfully. All this power, and not a single switch to flip like a girl at a jukebox. Bop floated to the ceiling and spit out a hair-fine filament. It kissed the edge of a turning ring and stole a whisper of its song. Navigation field is susceptible to perturbation at 3 interference nodes, he said. 2 are inaccessible without phase authorization. 1 is physical. My favorite, Darla said, snapping open her compact. Its mirror wasn't a mirror anymore. It had been eating Chorus's light since she'd palmed it. The auric pulse emitter thrummed soft as a heartbeat. She tuned it the way she tuned a radio at 14, her ear leaned against the night, catching stations that didn't like to be caught. The physical node was a piece of humility disguised as strength, a fail-safe aperture for heat management tucked where no sane intruder could reach without being sliced by the singing rings. She watched the spin, counted the beats, then stepped like she had on the wing of a plane once, in a bet that bought her a scar and a reputation. Foot here, hand there, twist, trust that the third ring's hesitation was real. Yes, there, slide. Don't think about the part where you lose fingers if you miss. She reached the aperture and slipped the stiletto tip into its seam, not to jam it, but to tune it a hair off its favorite frequency. Bop thrummed agreement. Node resonates. Sweet, she said, and set the compact's emitter to hum just shy of the ship's self-regard. A new note entered the chamber, too low for human ears, perfect for upsetting the stomach of a machine that thought it couldn't have one. The rings, turning, developed a cough. It was minute. It was enough. Chorus, she called, conversational, because she believed in good manners even when burglarizing a flagship. We're going to go sightseeing. I recommend you look out the window. There are no windows, Chorus said from the ceiling, aggravated elegance barely holding. Your incursion is trivial. Your capture is certain. Capture me, she said, but steer while you try. She lifted her voice and sang. Not jazz, not now. This was a lullaby her mother sang when hurricanes crawled up from the Gulf. A song about shutters and soup and holding hands in the dark. She poured into it the heat the Zorath couldn't model, the way grief and hope could share a mouth. The emitter in her compact carried the contour of her tune into the node. The node passed it like gossip into the rings. The map of where here is blossomed a flaw. Bop flashed. Fleet vector is adjusting 2 degrees. 3. 5. Make it 10, Darla whispered, and pressed the lipstick case flat against the aperture until its treated pigments smeared like blood on a church step. The rings hiccuped in unison. Far away, but not far enough. The fleet's escort craft leaned their noses where a woman humming had suggested, not toward open sky or safety. Toward the storm belts circling Venus, ropey, boiling highways of acid, lightning and rotational malice that could tear the math right out of your bones. Distantly, audible through the ship like a rumor under the floorboards, alarms woke. They weren't sirens. They were words. Status codes escalating in a language Darla couldn't speak but understood perfectly. Panic tried to put on a lab coat and failed. Chorus arrived like frost. The avatar unfolded in the air, immaculate lines vibrating at the edges. Cease. Make me, she said again, and upped the lullaby to a harmony. The room lurched microscopically as the flagship adjusted to keep pace with the escorts. Out in the clouds, the sky turned meaner. Beyond the hull, Venus rolled one yellow eye and bared her weather. You steer fleets with your mind, Darla said softly. We steer with our hearts. Watch. A new voice crackled in her ear, fuzzy as old vinyl. Hello? Then clearer, ragged. Is anyone? This is the Dairy Bell research tender. We were taken 2 days ago. Our cells just... A breath, a sob that wanted to be a laugh. The locks opened. Bop blinked a grin. Ripple effects propagate. Copy. Dairy Bell, Darla said, so calm she surprised herself. "This is Captain Darla Starr, in the middle of a grand theft. Put your brave pants on. I'm gonna buy you a hole." Another voice jumped on frequency, voice hoarse with fear and cigarettes. "Dock Workers Shuttle Marlowe, we hear you. Got 6 souls and a bad attitude." "Welcome to the floor show, Marlowe," Darla said. "Everyone who can hear me. Human, stubborn, stupid, alive. If you find a corridor that looks forgotten, that's mine. If you hear a song, follow it. If a door decides to be a door, don't ask why. Run." The navigation rings warbled, offended. Chorus's avatar rippled dangerously. "Unauthorized broadcasts will be suppressed." "You and what chorus?" Darla murmured. "Oh, right." She changed songs. She didn't know the words to the new one because there weren't any. It was rhythm and breath, and the way a crowd shout at a field goal could twist weather. The emitter smiled along. The node passed the smile. Somewhere aft, a containment field thought it heard the ocean and lowered itself a hair to listen. "Chaos variables exceed tolerance," Chorus said. It tried to say it like an observation. It sounded like a swear. "That's our brand," Darla said. Out beyond the hull, the storm belt threw a tantrum only planets can. Lightning stitched the cloud deck in jagged sutures. The fleet's forward edges began to feather, shimmering as field geometry met atmospheric spite. The escort swung to correct, but the flagship corrected too, and Darla was holding the flagship's elbow while it did it. The math got drunk. The parade tripped on its own formation. Chorus tried force. The field in the room pressed her toward the floor, an invisible palm that wanted her to kneel. She angled her shoulder against nothing and laughed breathlessly through her teeth. "Gentle," she said. "I'm fragile, remember?" The pressure eased a fraction. The ship did not want to break its specimen. It wanted to categorize her, to label the jar. She used the inch it gave like she used every inch life had ever rented her, all the way. "Star," came another voice, eager and young. "Wyatt, we're still with the convoy. We saw the flagship swallow you and, ma'am, are you doing weather?" "Borrowing it," she said. "Keep the beacon steady. When I tip their T, you run, lower vector. Ride the shoulder of the belt where it's mean but not murderous." "Copy, mean not murderous," Wyatt said, the grin audible. "Tell Ree I'm planning to live," Darla added. "She owes me a drink." "You owe her 3, Wyatt said, too fast, too fond, and cut the line before she could say the thing that would make it real. Chorus began to sing. It was not music, it was a multiple. The avatar vanished and reappeared in 6 places. The ship's voice came from everywhere at once, and nowhere specifically. The rings strained toward true, toward straightness. The node tried to ignore the compact's insistent hum. The fleet pulled like a harnessed team, learning it had been paired to a racehorse with opinions. "Your actions jeopardize your species," Chorus said. "We will adjust." "Adjust away," Darla said. "We'll be over here, being alive." The ship changed tactics. If it couldn't stop her hand, it would stop her mouth. The air thickened in her throat with the weight of a memory that wasn't hers. Empty skies, clean lines, silence like a virtue. She almost choked on the loneliness of it. Bup pinged. She bit the inside of her cheek until she tasted iron. "Pain is a metronome too. Humans," she said, voice rough but steady, into the open frequency, into the ship's listening walls, into the bone of her own fear. "Listen up. You are not numbers. You are not parts. If you can hear me, you are an improbable miracle built in a wet workshop we call home. I want you to do something I can't program. Decide. Decide to stand up. Decide to be inconvenient. Decide to be brave in a way that will make a good story later. The gallery doors began to fail in small, satisfying dominoes. Somewhere below, someone laughed, like they'd been holding it for too long. In the next breath, someone cried. In the next, boots ran. Chorus answered with a clenched jaw. Mutiny protocols engaged. There it is, Darla breathed. The M-word. On ships like these, mutinies were math errors. The ship didn't have a drawer for them. It tried to file the noise under familiar tabs and cut itself on the sharp edges. A dozen sub-processes popped error flags. They needed oversight. Oversight needed attention. Attention was finite. Where do you spend it? The chorus flickered into triage. The prison doors and the navigation dais were both high priority. So were field harmonics. So was the convoy. So was the aberrant human, who had somehow elbowed her way into the conductor's chair. You can't watch all of us at once, she said, and fed the node another wrong note. The fleet slid, this time visibly for anyone watching through instruments or lucky hatches. An elegant, horrifying formation bending off script, noses nosing toward the gleam of a storm belt that looked like yellow silk wound tight around a goddess's waist. The escorts, shields began to hiss under acid. The flagship's smooth skin prickled as if with gooseflesh. The radio filled with humanity. Door open, I don't know why. This way, grab her hand. If we die running. Wyatt again, breathless now. Star, we're at the window. 5, 4, 3, Ree said in the background, voice like a bell. 2, punch. The convoy dropped, not away from the belt, down the shoulder of it. The Shepherd drones went first, ion sprays flaring into improvised umbrellas. The beacon's cradle rode their slipstream. The tug and haulers stacked behind in a daring little ladder. The storm slapped hard, and the drones slapped back like barroom fighters too drunk to remember physics. Darla's mouth was a hard, proud line. That's it. That's our boys. Chorus tried a last trick. The pressure surged. The rings accelerated toward a perfect speed that would shear her from the dais if she didn't flinch. She didn't. She made a fist around the compact so tight it bit her palm. She thought of her sisters arguing and laughing, of her father's hands black with grease, of a record spinning in a kitchen while rain battered the windows and no one cared because humanity had soup in one another. She sang the rawest thing a human can carry across a room. The rings missed, not by much, enough. The flagship shuddered as the fleet's lead elements touched the belt's teeth. For a heartbeat that might stun a god, the Zorath Dominion's certainty met weather and lost the first round. Welcome to the human condition, boys, she said, and laughed like a dare. The radio erupted, we're through, alive, keep going. Beacon cradle holding, repeat holding. Bop darted near, his eye wide, the little bots hum an octave higher with glee. Probability of survival increased by 21%. Make it 30, she said. I like round numbers. Round numbers are, he began. Don't you dare say inefficient, she warned, and blew him a kiss. The ship learned. Of course it did. It reallocated. Doors that had charmed themselves open remembered duty. Fields stiffened. The avatar coalesced into a single, furious elegance. Termination authorized, Chorus said. Darla winked. Finally speaking your heart. She snapped the compact shut. The node sang one last wrong note, then stabilized as the rings found their tempo again. That was all right. She had bought a window and riddled it with exits. She had lit a fire in a house that feared sparks. She had taught a geometry how to stutter. Humans, she said into the frequency, dancing back through the rings as if the room couldn't quite decide to stop her. Find each other. Move. If you can't fight, confuse. If you can't confuse, sing. If you can't sing, hum. I'll take whatever noise you've got." "Star," Wyatt breathed, awe and terror handing the microphone back and forth. "You just made them bleed numbers." "Good," she said, reaching the corridor and flipping the stiletto tip in her fingers like a coin she'd already won. "Let's see what color comes out." The corridor burned with alarms, red pulses racing along chrome like a heartbeat, trying to outrun disaster. Darla Starr did not run. She sauntered with a sway that said the party was over because she said so. The Zorath ship tried to correct her trajectory with nudges of pressure that were supposed to feel like fate. She ignored them the way a jazz singer ignores a metronome and trusts the drummer. The hangar was a cathedral of cold geometry, floors so clean they reflected her boots, walls that pretended to be horizons. Racks of small craft slept in elegant silence, each one a silver shark with a skin of equations. Drones darted along rails, their joints clicking in neat cadences. When the doors irised for 2 evacuating overseers, Darla slid through in their wake with a smile that dared the air to stop her. "Pick me a pony," she told Bop. The chrome sphere zipped ahead, scanning hull signatures with an eager hum. Interceptor class. Fast. Agile. Mine to drive interface. "I like all of those words," she said, and palmed a sleek wedge with a nose like a dagger. It had no cockpit in any human sense. The canopy was a seamless curve. The hull had no visible seam. It didn't want a pilot. It wanted permission. "Let me in, sweetheart," Darla whispered, laying her palm flat against the curve. The ship didn't open. It considered. She took out her lipstick and drew a little red heart on the panel, where the ship sensed authorization. The treated pigment soaked the surface with a noise the interface could not catalog. Bop nudged a burst of nonsense into the authorization loop. A priest reading the Beatitudes, a muffled baseball broadcast, a recording of a train whistle in fog. The panel sighed. The canopy flowed open like mercury that had remembered how to be a door. "Thank you," she said, and slid in. No seat. A cradle. She let it hold her. No yoke. Pads under her palms drank her pulse. The interceptor's systems reached for her like a question. The language was wrong, but they both spoke velocity, and that was enough. "Can you fly me?" she asked. "Negative," Bop said cheerfully, "but you can fly everything." "That's the spirit." The hangar doors were not open. The hangar doors were never supposed to be open while a prisoner sat in the cradle of an interceptor. Darla set her jaw and let her breath fall into the rhythm of a song that said doors were just unfriendly ideas. "You're going to like me," she told the craft. "I'm trouble with a good manicure." The engines woke. Not a human growl. A clean, perfect hum that sounded like a mathematician saying yes. The ship lifted on a cushion of displacement. Drones wheeled toward her, but the path she wanted was already adjusting to fit her superstition. Doors irised because everything else needed more attention. Chorus was busy trying to sew shut a dozen holes in its certainty. For a handful of seconds, Darla outranked the locks. She launched. The hangar peeled away. The flagship's mouth opened on the world. Venus leaped up like a dare. Wind and sulfur and light hit her in a rush that felt like a kiss from something too big to care whether you survived it. She arrowed into the storm. Lightning split the sky in white veins. The clouds rolled, bruised and gold, tumbling over and over as if the planet had its own slow heartbeat. Sheets of acid hissed across the hull and slid away, unwilling to cling to something moving that fast. The interceptor was nimble in a way that made Darla grin despite the stakes. Beautiful machines do that, even when they belong to the enemy. She trimmed the nose, felt the ship's reluctance and then its delight, and dived through a gap that didn't exist until she imagined it. "Convoy on scope," Bop reported, voice bright. Beacon cradle stable, Shepherd drones maintaining umbrella, tug and haulers in formation. Wyatt? Still handsome, came the reply, breathless and young. Still alive. Captain, you did something to their formation. We can't see straight lines anymore. They keep bending. Good. Keep them busy hating geometry. How's Ree? I'm here, Ree said, cool as an ice cube in whiskey, holding. If you get yourself killed, I'm calling your sisters and telling them it was because you were showing off. Please don't. They'll agree. Keep that box safe. The box hummed in Darla's mind like a promise. Inside the armored cradle was Earth's first real try at making Venus bearable. A catalytic spine wound with lattices. Seed microbes that could tolerate hell for a while and then teach it to be less rude. A quantum feedback array that could nudge local chemistry into new habits. When she thought about it, Darla felt the old terror and the new hope wrestle. It felt like the first time she flew alone, night air black as ink under her wings and every star a dare. On your mark, Ree said. We're at the drop. Stand by, Darla said. Let me give you a little chaos. She rolled the interceptor and flipped a panel that probably wasn't meant to be flipped. The ship tried to ask for a password. She sang it a lullaby instead. Her compact, tucked in her flight kit, still held a whisper of the node's wrong note. She let that whisper out of the mirror. The interceptor heard the shape of her voice and mistook it for a command from someone the ship respected. Venus obliged. A pocket of turbulence opened where Darla pointed. Clouds shifted like curtains drawn by a hand in a different room. Now, Darla said. The Shepherd drones flared. Ion streams pushed acid aside, sculpting a temporary throat in the storm. Ree's tug nosed into it, the cradle steady as a teacup on a saucer held by the steadiest hands in heaven. The haulers tucked in. The convoy slid into the throat, the way a song slides into its chorus. Beacon sequencing, Ree said. 3, 2, 1. It wasn't a boom, it wasn't fireworks. The beacon woke like a seed realizes it has been planted. It sent a whisper into the thick air and listened for the echo. It found its own reflection in the acid and told it a better story. Lattice lit. Microbe banks warmed in their armored shell. Feedback loops spun until the numbers began to smell like rain. Darla saw it like a bruise turn to a glow. The clouds near the cradle shifted hue, yellow softening at the edges. A ghost of blue threaded through. It wasn't oxygen you could breathe. Not yet. It was the first line of a poem scratched into a wall that used to be blank. Ree? Darla breathed. Stable, Ree said, and for the first time her voice cracked on a word. She's holding. She's working. Beautiful girl, Darla whispered to the beacon. You bite this world. You don't ever apologize. The Zorath noticed. Of course they did. They were an empire of notices. Interceptors rose from the flagship like knives, their skins flexing with equations that cut air. The escorts that had formed the fleet's curve reasserted formation with a jerk that told Darla the chorus had yanked control away from whatever sub-process she had confused. The sky filled with intent. Bop's eye flicked. Incoming. 4, 6, 8, 12. Many, Darla translated, copy. Let's dance. The interceptor wasn't built for a human pilot, but today it learned. It liked the way she oversteered on purpose and then pulled back at the last second, converting error into elegance. It liked the way she laughed when lightning chased them, and the way she whispered, "Thank you" to the ship when it let her cheat the wind. She folded the craft through gaps that were more hope than space. Bolts stitched behind her, hot and white. A blast of shaped pressure tried to turn her left. She leaned right and made the pressure admit it had guessed wrong. "Darla Starr," Chorus said into her ear, voice brittle. "Stand down. Your species will be eradicated for this." "Maybe," she said, and let the ship feel her grin, "but good luck predicting how." The first interceptor reached her firing solution and threw a cut across her path. She raised her left palm and pressed it to the interface as if she were palming a jukebox. The ship didn't know the gesture, it knew the intent. It rolled too late for comfort and too early for consistency. The cut shaved a curl of air from her wing. She felt it as a tug at her shoulder. She banked hard and laughed, breathless and fierce. "Prisoner cells reporting movement," Bob said, translating 100 stolen whispers. "Doors compromised. Humans in motion. Some heading toward hangars, some toward maintenance bays, some toward airlocks." "Tell them to pick the bad idea that keeps them together," Darla said. "If they can't fight, tell them to run where the ship says no and see if it turns into yes. Fear is a pressure system, too." Voices filled her radio. A woman who sounded like salt and cigarettes. "We've got 3 from hydroponics, and a tech who swears he can hotwire a prayer." "Which way?" "Follow the sound," Darla told her. "If you don't hear sound, make some." A man whose voice shook. "We found a shuttle with no controls. We're sitting in a smooth rock." "You're in a cruiser," Darla said. "It only pretends not to like you. Put both hands on the place that looks wrong. Breathe. Imagine it opening for you. Lie if you have to." Silence. Then a wild laugh. It opened. "That's right," Darla said softly. "We're very persuasive." She looped the interceptor under a rolling cake of cloud, let lightning flash over her canopy like paparazzi bulbs, and came up behind 2 Zorath craft that had committed to a neat little pincer. She shot between them. They corrected in mirror, then in mirror again, perfectly predictable. She threw the ship into a dirty slide that would make a test pilot yell and came out laughing on the other side. The 2 Zorath kissed noses like embarrassed bachelors and spun away. "Chaos variables exceed tolerances," Chorus snapped. "Terminate." "Tell me something nice," Darla said. Another voice broke in, deeper, colder, not Chorus. Someone using Chorus as a mouth. "Human pilot. I am Vector Commander of this formation. You have contaminated our geometry. This ends now." "You sound like every headmaster I ever had," Darla said. "Let me guess. You prefer silence to conversation and straight lines to laughter." "Your kind mistakes noise for life," the commander said. "We will teach you the difference." "You can try," Darla said, "and let the ship taste her pulse again." The interceptor answered with a purr like a cat that has decided the new human is acceptable. She pointed its nose at the worst part of the sky. "Wyatt," she said. "Status." "Breathing," he said, and then, "Odd. Cap. The clouds look different." "They're waving." "Not waves," Reed corrected gently. "Fronts. The beacon is teaching the air to fold differently. It's small, but it's real." "Keep her safe," Darla said. "We're going to upset 6 very expensive ships so they forget how to be gentlemen." She led the interceptors on a tour of Venus storms. She dove where any sane pilot would climb. She climbed into pockets that looked solid and found the hollow places. The Zorath followed in formation like good students tracing a chalk line. When she broke the line, they hesitated for a fraction, then corrected to the closest rule. Every time they corrected, they were a step behind, a beat late, a degree wrong. "Humans," the Vector Commander said, and now there was something like wonder under the contempt. "You refuse to be what you are." "We refuse to be only what we are," she said. "There's a difference." An interceptor finally earned its shot. Darla felt the world tighten around her, a noose of intent. She noted it, and did something appalling. She let it hit. Not hard. A kiss on the tail. It shoved her into a spin. She fell for a count of 3, let gravity think it had her, then kicked the ship sideways, and let the spin become a roll, and the roll become a climb. The pursuing Zorath adjusted according to their best model of what a distressed pilot would do. They flew into a clot of electric blue. Their shields took it. Their certainty did not. "Beacon reading?" Darla asked. "Stable," Bob said. "The first ring of catalytic activity is holding. Parameter drift trending favorable." "Say it in plain, sugar." "It's working." She blew a kiss toward the bright smear of Rhee's vector and turned her attention to the flagship. It hung above the storm like a pronouncement, beautiful and severe. Its skin glimmered with altered math as it tried to reconcile the wrong note. She had fed it with the rightness it believed itself to own. Prisoner shuttles began to trickle from its mouth. Some were Zorath shells that had decided to act like doors and then like friends. Some were human tin cans, dragged into a hateful embrace, and now escaping the way old cars do, coughing but loyal. "Star," came a voice in her ear, cracked with static and triumph. "This is the Dairy Bell. You saved our skins. We're following your wake." "Follow Rhee," Darla said. "Follow the drones. If you see lightning, thank it for the light and go the other way." The Vector commander spoke one last time, more measured, as if saving the sentiment for a record. "You have cost us a formation and a model. This is not victory. This is a delay. Your species will be eradicated." "Maybe," Darla said, and the grin felt like a knife that liked her. "But good luck predicting how." She broke toward the flagship's underbelly, toward a string of escorts that had repositioned to cut her off. At the last possible second, she didn't dive through the gap she had made. She jumped lanes entirely, slid along a curve that nobody had drawn yet, and shot upward. The escorts crossed the empty space where she should have been and scissored each other's wake. In the confusion, a hangar door that expected order met a shuttle, piloted by a man who only believed in exit signs. The door made a startled decision to be open. The shuttle slipped free with 6 beating hearts inside. "Time to leave," Bob advised, as if she were choosing to exit a dance floor before last call. "Agreed." Darla pointed the interceptor toward the upper cloud layers. The storm belt screamed. Lightning forked like a blessing and a threat. The sky stacked in sheets of gold and white and green that hadn't existed an hour ago. She flew through them and felt very small and very necessary. The ship wanted to smooth her edges. She refused. She put her palms flat and gave it a piece of herself it could understand. Intention that wasn't tidy. Joy that wasn't earned yet. Grief for what would be lost later. Stubbornness like a knot in a rope. The interceptor took her and became hers the way a wild horse sometimes lowers its head and lets the new rider stay. They broke through to the high brightness. Venus spread under them like a vast, wrinkled silk. Storm belts cinched tight, new hues spreading in shy fingers from the beacon's heart. Far below, the convoy skated along the shoulder of a monster and got away with it. Shuttles and tenders winked into view, ugly and beautiful. Humans shouted across the air in a dozen languages, and all of them meant the same thing. Present. "Darla Starr," Chorus said, very quietly. Query. She almost laughed. "Go on." "Your resistance to recursion produces error," it said, "yet you achieve goals. How do you model yourself?" "I don't," she said. "I tell a better story than the last one, and then I try to deserve it." "I do not understand." "I know," she said, "and it wasn't unkind. That's our advantage." She turned the interceptor nose onto the black. Stars glittered like sugar on velvet. If she leaned back and closed her eyes, she could pretend the night was an old friend's coat. The radio was a party of survivors. Someone cried. Someone sang. Someone shouted a joke that only made sense because they were still alive. Rhee checked in with a single word that meant the world. Holding. "Take us home," Darla told the ship. "We have to make a report, and then a mess, and then a myth." Home Vector plotted, Bob said. He sounded smug, and she would let him be. Venus threw one last tantrum at their backs. Lightning crawled up through the clouds and painted the belly of her stolen craft. The glow from the newborn chemistry wrapped around the hull and made it look, for a second, as if she flew through a ghost ocean. She laughed out loud, giddy and grateful, and tipped her wings at the planet. "You're mean and you're beautiful," she told it. "We'll visit again." Behind them, deep in the yellow, the beacon worked. It didn't care about politics. It only cared about habit breaking and new habits forming. It would fail 1,000 times and succeed once, then teach the failure to imitate the success. It was very human. Voices quieted on the radio. The survivors settled into the rhythm of escape and the ache after adrenaline. Bop dimmed his eye and hummed a lullaby he had learned from her humming earlier, imperfect and dear. Darla let the ship fly itself for a minute and pressed her fingers to her own jaw, where strain had set a hard line. She softened it with a breath. She stared at the stars like a girl who'd been allowed to stay up past curfew, and discovered the night wasn't scary so much as vast. The Zorath commander spoke once more, a last declaration sent up after her like a spear lobbed from a wall. "We will erase you." She let the silence after soak in. Then she answered, softly, "Try." The narrator, who had been waiting all along to clear his throat, finally did. You could hear the grin in his voice, and the promise behind the grin. And so begins the legend of the retro-rocket babes, humanity's most dangerous weapon, women who refuse to play by galactic rules.